there.
Today, I'm talking about the 1976 Chowchilla kidnapping. On July 15, 1976, 26 children and their bus driver were kidnapped in Chowchilla, California, by armed men who blocked the highway around 4 p.m. that day. The students who were attending Dairyland Elementary School for summer school were being dropped off on their way back from a field trip at the Chowchilla Fairgrounds swimming pool. The kidnappers hid the bus in a drainage slough and drove the children and bus driver around in 2 vans for 11 hours, eventually taking them to a quarry in Livermore, California. There, the kidnappers imprisoned the victims inside a buried moving van with a small amount of food and water and a number of mattresses. So I've compiled some video clippings of the 1976 Chowchilla kidnappings to tell the story a little further. So check them out.
Very little, no indication as to why this was done or what they intended to do. And that's about where we are right at the moment.
The children were finally able to free themselves from the bunker, which had been stocked with food and ventilation fans. They found a quarry watchman who called police. A brief attempt to stake out the quarry in hopes the abductors would return as they had promised was dropped when word of the rescue was leaked. The kids were reported to be dirty, cold, and in many cases scantily dressed, but otherwise fine.
All of them in fine shape. The medical people I have talked with that have examined them, and they say there are no injuries.
At the time, Houchin said there were 3 suspects. Today, descriptions of 2 and the possible name of a 3rd, Jerry McCune, were released. After the news conference, the sheriff's office permitted the filming of the children in the classroom where they were waiting for the return trip to Chowchilla. They had already been fed and checked by doctors, and many had been given jail coveralls to wear. Too big, but they did the job. The children were being taken over to another building one by one and interrogated carefully by officers to extract all the information possible. Many amused themselves while waiting by drawing or coloring. Only 1 or 2 slept. Attorney General Evel Younger was on the scene, offering whatever assistance he and his state agents could, but they were as baffled as anybody about the incident. About 1:45 a.m., the children and Ray, exhausted but anxious to be reunited with their families, were all loaded on a Greyhound bus for the 2.5-hour trip to Chowchilla. They were initially escorted by a helicopter buzzing protectively overhead as they turned out of Santa Rita and headed down the highway to the valley.
Shoulder here, shoulder.
They're all some smiling, some tired, all very happy.
Some of the children, weary from the near 36-hour ordeal, had a few smiles and grins. They were led inside the police station. Some of the smaller ones were carried off the bus. All 26 of those abducted Thursday afternoon stepped into crowds of cheers, including applause for the last one off, the school bus driver, 55-year-old Edward Ray, known affectionately by the youngsters as Edward. There was an anxious joy among the parents, but Miss Joanne Brown said she had felt optimistic all along about the safe return of her son and daughter.
I really did. And the people that have been with us all until 2 o'clock this last night or this morning and all day long, they know that. I really believe that.
We also talked with Bob Reynolds about word that his 2 daughters were found safe.
It's wonderful. You can't say there's enough words to describe how it feels. I'm just so happy I could cry.
We visited the Reynolds family at their home shortly after the reunion. 13-year-old Judy and 9-year-old Becky say they were frightened by the abductors.
How about you?
Well, I was in a different bus than Becky, and I thought that he was going to kill her and Edward and everybody else that was in a different bus.
Edward wasn't in the back of the bus with us. He was in the front with the man.
At the time, you were quite frightened because you didn't know what they were going to do, and they didn't say anything. Did they say anything along the way?
Yeah, my bus, the van driver of mine, he acted real nice. He kept saying, "You guys are right back there" and stuff.
We had to go wet in our pants.
Did they offer you anything to eat?
No.
No, there was food in that hole. It's the only place.
And this hole, what did you think this hole was? What did it appear to be?
A sewer.
Although frightened, they followed bus driver Edward Ray in digging out of the so-called bunker. Ray says after the long trip, they were lowered into the near subsurface building by ladder. It was covered with a steel plate and dirt was piled on.
Had this building all lined with wire, big old mesh wire. And they stood on the outside. We hear them cutting the wires, and ceiling started to cave in and everything else. We thought we were going to have it right then, but kept begging to let us out. So later in the afternoon there, we never did hear them cutting the wires or no more. So me and a couple of boys decided we better start digging. We was going to lose our lives there, same as getting if we dug ourselves out.
Will soon be out of prison and on parole. He's 63 years old. His older brother Richard was released 3 years ago. News of the latest release did not go over well with Linda Labandera. She was one of the victims.
I was kind of nauseous and then very tearful because first of other children, the children that were in the kidnapping itself, and as well as children in the future.
Linda was 9 years old when she and her 3 sisters were among the 26 children on that bus when it was hijacked. They were herded into moving vans, then hidden in a trailer buried in a rock quarry. After 15 hours, they dug their way out. Now a schoolteacher, she's afraid the release sends the wrong message and fears it puts other children at risk.
How the laws affect them and other crimes that might be committed where people might think, oh, I'll probably just do 20 years and I'll get my freedom again, no big deal.
All 3 kidnappers were sentenced to life in prison. 2 are out now, and it bothers her the 3rd kidnapper, Fred Woods, has a parole hearing coming up soon and will likely be released as well.
I think each of the men had 26 life sentences, one for each later.
When we stopped, masked men with guns jumped out.
The memories just as vivid.
And they got on the bus and they took us.
Larry Park was only 6 when Frederick Woods and brothers Richard and James Schoenfeld kidnapped him along with a busload of 25 other children and driver near Chowchilla, burying them alive in an underground bunker, hoping for a $5 million ransom. Woods, the last still behind bars, denied parole for the 17th time Tuesday. Park still remembers every detail of the more than 24 hours of terror, held captive in a shelter which was slowly caving in.
The sides of the moving van were buckling in. The top of the moving van was buckling in.
Park says an older student saved their lives, digging for hours to freedom.
Dirt just showered into the hole. And after all the dirt had come into the hole, there was sunlight that came in the hole. And it was magnificent.
But Park says his family could not shake the trauma, crumbling afterwards while he spun into a life of pain and addiction before finding his faith and eventually his path.
I let go of this bitterness and this hatred that I had toward the kidnappers, and I realized that all of the bitterness and all of the hatred that I could ever hold for them wasn't punishing them, it was killing me.
Park met all his captors in prison. The Schoenfelds released several years back. And this man, who says he spent his life a victim, now also
prison. He's actually been running a Christmas tree farm from prison, and it's actually legal to do that in California, but he didn't ask permission from the warden. Bottom line is he hasn't been following the rules, and so he was denied for a 17th time. But you got to understand, every time there's a parole hearing, these people who are now adults have to relive the trauma they went through when they were just 5 and 6 years old.
And David, why would men such as these commit this horrific crime?
Well, look, it's interesting, Maribel. When you watch the hour tomorrow night on 48, you will hear there's actually a quote where one of the convicted captors said that they thought because children are precious, it would make sense to kidnap him and then call in a ransom. You got to understand, this story gripped the nation in 1976. 26 school children just vanish in broad daylight with their bus driver. The bus is found. The kids are buried alive in a rock quarry outside of San Francisco. Walter Cronkite led the CBS Evening News with it. The president was fixated on it. Everyone in the country was watching. And thankfully, the kids were returned to their family members alive. It is a hell of a story, which we'll tell tomorrow night.
Amazing, wild. Where are the men now, David?
Well, so 2 of them have gotten out. They were, good behavior in prison, so they've been released. And you've got this one holdout who was most recently denied parole. He'll get another chance in 5 years. But meanwhile, while he's in prison, he continues to run these businesses. And for the victims, the survivors, as they like to be known, it is traumatic. I really can't wait for you to see the hour and see what it has been like for them for the last 40 or so years to try and get their life on the right track, given what happened to them when they...
Well, we were in the van, and I felt lucky that I was in the van with Edward. And people were all over me, and they were peeing and stuff, and I said some colorful words for them to get off of me. And then Edward said, now you need to knock that off, Jody. And then I was like, oh no, he's going to tell my parents when we get home. And so that kind of gave me hope that I was going to see my parents again, because he knew my parents. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to be in trouble because I said curse words.
Oh gosh, okay. Oh, my grandpa would have loved it. He would have loved the people. He would have loved it being at the park here where all the kids, my boys play baseball here, and he just loved it. It was a great day, and we're very honored that they thought of him today, and we could do it on his 94th birthday today. That was new to us, yeah. The Edward, that's phenomenal. That's super exciting, and every year we can celebrate his birthday. He loves strawberry ice cream and cake, so maybe that's what we'll have today.
10-year-old Chowchilla boy on board a school bus.
There's hardly a day that goes by that, I don't think about that.
He was one of the 26 kids and bus driver who were buried alive by 3 armed kidnappers in a box truck in a Livermore quarry. The men had planned to demand $5 million ransom for their safety, but the victims managed to escape hours later. The trauma led to schizophrenia and addiction for Park, but now, decades later, he's chosen forgiveness.
It is possible to forgive, and it is possible to find peace.
All 3 men involved in the Chowchilla bus kidnapping were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Fred Woods was the last of the kidnappers to remain locked up. After appearing before a parole board 17 times, in March, Woods was granted parole as well.
Talking about it, I get goosebumps.
Madera County District Attorney Sally Moreno says she fought for Woods to stay behind bars.
Has he demonstrated that he's been rehabilitated? And he hasn't. As recently as 2019, he was disciplined for running businesses out of the jail or out of the prison.
But after his parole was reviewed this week, the decision became official. Woods will soon be released from California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo.
When they arrested him, he was busy selling the rights to the movie. He's always been about the money. Whatever he had to do to get the money, he would have done to those kids, including bury him alive.
Some of those who advocated for him in his final parole hearing were unlikely supporters. Larry Park was among them.
This resentment and bitterness that I've been holding on to my entire life for all 3 of those men. I just want them to find some peace and some comfort, just have a good life.
D.A. Moreno and other kidnapping survivors who took part in the parole hearing were confident Woods was not ready to be released.
Whatever he has to do to get more money, he'll do. And whoever's in his way, better look out.
Theories in the case. Number 1, money was the motive, but ego drove the plan. The official motive was ransom. They demanded $5 million, but many analysts believe that the kidnappers were overconfident, wealthy young men who thought that they were smarter than law enforcement. Frederick Newhall Woods IV, in particular, is often described as driven by ego and entitlement, not desperation. The plan shows extreme planning, but no real exit strategy, suggesting fantasy over realism. In short, they wanted money, but also the thrill of pulling off a quote-unquote perfect crime. Theory 2, they didn't expect the children to escape. One of the most discussed theories is that the kidnappers never anticipated the children and driver digging their way out. underestimated Ed Ray, the bus driver, and the older kids' ability to organize. They assumed that the buried trailer would hold them until ransom negotiations concluded. This miscalculation is seen as the fatal flaw in the crime. Because of this crime, the effects on the children were long-term trauma and psychological effects. Even though all of the children and their bus drivers survived physically, decades of reporting and follow-up have shown that many survivors suffered post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, nightmares, panic attacks, and ongoing fears even many years later. Some developed phobias, personality changes, and stress-related behaviors as they grew up. In interviews more recently, survivors have described still feeling watched, anxious, or emotionally affected by their ordeal many decades after it happened. According to recent reports, one survivor has passed away, and that was Jody Heffington Madrano. She died in the last few years. Her family said she was deeply affected by the trauma and that she had been active in trying to keep the kidnappers behind bars at parole hearings. Another ongoing source of distress for many survivors has been the parole of the kidnappers. The fact that all three men responsible were eventually paroled, the last in 2022, has reopened emotional wounds for many of the former child victims, some of whom testified at parole hearings or spoke publicly about how it affected them decades later. I mean, you can imagine the effects that a tragedy like this would have on children. I mean, for many of them, it lasts a lifetime and continues. The effects of this kidnapping. My heart goes out to them, and that one day that they'll find peace